Hi everyone! Welcome to our new audiobook. I really appreciate it if you could subscribe or liked the video. It helps me a lot. The novel of the same name is also available on Amazon Kindle. If you enjoy this book, please support the author's work by clicking the link below. Now, let's start.
Chapter 1. The Perfect Gift. Layla's POV. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the neckline of my emerald green dress. The color matched my eyes that always revealed a hint of my wolf, Grace. Tonight was supposed to be special, our third wedding anniversary. I let out a shaky breath. Everything was ready. The table is set with our finest silverware, the candles flicker delicately, and the aroma of the dishes I've so carefully prepared fills the dining room. Wine-braised lamb is set alongside a chocolate soufflé, a dish that took me several tries earlier in the day to create to perfection. This was supposed to be a celebration. It was a reminder of the bond we'd shared for 3 years, a bond that, at least as far as the wolves were concerned, was strong and unshakable. Grace cooed softly in my head, but I sensed her unease. I cut my hair one last time. The dress fit my figure perfectly. For a moment, a flicker of hope flashed through my chest. Maybe tonight, despite the odds, Theodore would surprise me. At that moment, my cell phone buzzed like a knife cutting through the quiet anticipation. At first, I thought it was another congratulatory message from one of the members, but the name on the screen didn't belong to a well-wisher. The text was from a Sarah, and my thumb hovered as Grace stirred uneasily. My heart stopped when I opened the message. Attached is a video. The image is shaky, but clear enough. It's Theodore, standing in a swanky jewelry store, the same store he and I walked by a few weeks ago, where I had admired the delicate Moonstone necklace behind the glass. I've never asked for it outright. It's not in my nature to ask for material things, but Theodore noticed that my eyes stayed on it, and for a moment I thought maybe he could understand. But the video tells a different story. Theodore's large hands held the necklace carefully, the silver chain gleaming in the light. The warm smile on his face wasn't directed at me. Rather, it was directed at another woman. Victoria Moonstone, his stepsister. The video switches to him tying the necklace around her neck. "A new beginning," I heard him say in a low voice, as if the words had been burned into my mind. My chest constricted in agony. Grace howled in my head, her pain echoing like a storm that I couldn't calm. Not only is today our wedding anniversary, but today is also the day Victoria announced that she had successfully severed her partnership. It's all like a cruel joke. I sat paralyzed in my dining room chair. The meal in front of me, the flickering candlelight, it all seemed like a cruel mockery now. The betrayal burned hot and sharp, but I forced myself to stay calm. My hands shook as I picked up my cell phone again. The pack forums were buzzing with celebratory posts. One headline stood out: "Alpha King spends huge amount of money to please his Luna." For a moment, my heart was filled with bitterness. The one they praised and admired was not the one who walked out of this house today. The one who was my partner. Minutes turned into hours. I don't know if it was Grace's frantic pacing in my head that kept me awake, or the raging storm of questions I couldn't answer. The food gets cold. The candlelight dimmed. Midnight came, and the faint sound of a key turning a door lock. Theodore walked in, his tall, imposing frame filling the doorway. His dark eyes were sharper than ever and as striking as ever. He paused when he saw me sitting there, still dressed and waiting. "You're up late," he said casually, tossing his keys onto the counter. I clenched my hands under the table and took a steadying breath. "I'm waiting for my anniversary present." For a moment, something flickered in his gaze. Guilt? Shame? Maybe it was my imagination. "Anniversary," he repeated, as if the notion was completely behind him. "Yes," I said, meeting his gaze. 3 years later. He tugged at his tie and walked over to the bar, casually pouring himself a drink. "I'm sorry, Luna. I've been busy with pack business. I forgot." The calm in his tone gave Grace the creeps. He was lying. I knew it, and so did my wolf. I thought. I chose my words carefully. My voice didn't quiver, but there was an uncontrollable tightness in my throat. "I thought I saw something special in you today." Theodore didn't turn to face me. "What do you mean?" "The necklace," I said simply. "Moonstone necklace." "Oh," he said, finally turning to face me, leaning casually against the bar. "That one. I bought it for a friend, a thank you gift." My heart sank further, but I kept my expression neutral. I only wanted the necklace. He frowned slightly, his wine reaching his mouth and stopping. I'll ask my friend, he finally said. The air between us grew heavy. The lies were obvious, hanging between us like a wall I couldn't ignore. Theodore proceeded to the table. His frown deepened when he saw the still untouched food. You worked all night for this, he said, pointing to the plate. There was a hint of disapproval in his tone, but it was masked by concern. I'm not hungry, I said simply. Theodore began to clear his plate. He acted in a way that felt odd. Don't waste it tonight, he said with a sideways glance. I'll make something fresh for both of us. He quickly rolled up his sleeves and pulled the ingredients out of the refrigerator. He knew exactly what to make: venison and pasta. My favorite. There was a scent in the air, but I didn't speak. I barely moved as I watched him cook, the faint glimmer of hope from earlier resurfacing. But Grace disagreed. She fidgeted, her growl echoing in my head. Come on, he said after placing the plate in front of me. I forced myself to take a few bites. The food was good as always, but I couldn't taste it. After dinner, Theodore went to take a shower, and I sat in a chair in a daze of thought. Grace paced back and forth, her emotions confused. The image of Victoria with the necklace around her neck lingered in my mind. Theodore's mood seemed relaxed as he got into bed. He lay on his side and ran his hand along my hip. His touch is usually comforting, and now it feels foreign. I looked away slightly. Not tonight, Theodore. His hand paused. What's wrong? It's just my stomach, I lied. A flash of concern crossed his face. He said, You haven't slept in a while. You should see someone else. Maybe Rebecca at the treatment center. You know she's great. I rolled over and blinked back tears. His tone was caring, but it felt hollow. He couldn't see what the real problem was. Or rather, he refused to see it. It's been 5 weeks and I've had pups, and this is where I was at. I haven't told him yet. The plan was to tell him the news at dinner. But now everything hangs in the balance. The baby in my belly will change everything, but if we don't resolve this necklace issue, this betrayal issue, can we still raise them together? No, I can't let them grow up in an illusion. If the necklace doesn't come back, I have a decision to make. A hard, heartbreaking decision. I finally drifted into uneasy sleep, dreams filled with Moonstone jewels and betrayal. The morning came with a lingering sense of heaviness. Before I could think about it, there was a knock on the door. Luna? Mary Bennett's soft voice came from the hallway. I tightened my grip on my robe and opened the door. The butler bowed his head slightly. Miss Victoria Moonstone is here, and she says she's here to return something, Mary said, her voice low and calm. She's carrying a jewelry box. I froze. Grace growled softly. The moment of truth has arrived. Chapter 2. Returned Gifts. Layla's POV. My heart pounded as I smoothed down my robe and hastily tied my hair back. Victoria Moonstone was here with a jewelry box. Could it possibly be the necklace I had seen in the video? I moved toward the staircase, eager to confront Theodore's stepsister, when a tall figure suddenly blocked my path. Theodore stood at the top of the stairs, his broad shoulders tense, his dark eyes watching me carefully. Where are you going? He asked, his voice deceptively casual. Mary said Victoria is here to see me, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Apparently she has something to return. Theodore's jaw tightened. I'll handle Victoria. You don't need to come down. She asked for me specifically, I countered, studying his reaction. She's returning something that belongs to me. Layla, Theodore said, his tone shifting to that authoritative alpha voice he used when giving pack orders. Stay upstairs. I'll bring whatever it is to you. I'm coming down, I stated firmly, sidestepping him. Theodore's hand shot out, catching my wrist. Not roughly, but with enough pressure to make his intent clear. Layla. I met his gaze steadily. Let go, Theodore. After a tense moment, he released me with a barely concealed scowl and descended the stairs ahead of me. I followed close behind, watching his every movement, cataloging his unusual tension. Victoria Moonstone stood in our living room, looking immaculate as always. Her blonde hair cascaded in perfect waves down her back, her designer outfit clinging to her slim figure. A velvet jewelry box sat on the coffee table in front of her. Theodore! Victoria's face lit up when she saw my mate, her eyes barely acknowledging my presence. And Layla. Good morning. Victoria, Theodore greeted, his voice noticeably softer than it had been moments ago with me. What brings you here so early? Victoria smiled sweetly, lifting a glass of lemonade Mary must have served her. I wanted to return. The glass tilted in her hand, lemonade splashing down the front of her cream blouse. Oh, she gasped dramatically, setting the glass down with a clatter. Theodore was at her side instantly, concern etched on his face as he grabbed a napkin from the coffee table. Are you all right? Here, let me help you. I watched in stunned silence as Theodore Moonstone, the fearsome alpha king who rarely showed emotion even in private, fussed over Victoria like she was made of glass. He dabbed at her blouse with the napkin, his movements gentle, protective. It might stain, he said, his brow furrowed with worry. Mary Bennett appeared with a towel, her efficient manner a stark contrast to Theodore's frantic attention. It's just lemonade, Alpha, she said, offering the towel to Victoria. It won't stain if cleaned quickly. Theodore ignored Mary, continuing to dab at Victoria's blouse himself. I don't think I've ever seen you this concerned when I spill something, I remarked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. I must not be doing it dramatically enough. Theodore's hands froze. He straightened, suddenly aware of how his behavior must look. His expression shifted, closing off that rare display of concern. Victoria has always been clumsy, he said coolly, stepping back. A trait she never outgrew. Victoria's perfect lips curved into a pout. That's not very nice, Theodore. She dabbed at her blouse with Mary's towel. I came here to do something nice, and this is how you treat me? What exactly did you come to return? I asked, my eyes fixed on the velvet box. Victoria's gaze slid to mine, something calculating behind her smile. She picked up the box and held it out to me. This belongs to you, I believe. I took the box, feeling Theodore's eyes on me as I opened it. Inside lay the necklace, a stunning gold chain with a moonstone pendant, exactly like the one in the video. My stomach twisted. Thank you, I managed, my voice tight. How did you come to have it? Victoria's eyes flickered toward Theodore before returning to me. Theodore gave it to me yesterday, but when I learned it was your anniversary gift, I insisted on returning it. She touched her throat delicately. I couldn't possibly keep something meant for the Luna. The night before, when I'd confronted Theodore about the necklace, he'd claimed it was for Lucas. Now Victoria was standing here, confirming my suspicions that he'd lied. Theodore cleared his throat. It's just a trinket, he said dismissively. I'll get you a better one, Layla. Grace growled inside me. Just a trinket? After I'd admired it for months? No need, I said, my fingers closing around the box. This one is perfect. Victoria watched our exchange, her smile never reaching her eyes. Well, I should be going. I have an appointment at the therapy center. She turned to Theodore, touching his arm lightly. Thank you again for being so supportive during my divorce. I don't know what I'd do without you. Theodore nodded stiffly. Family takes care of family. I felt like an outsider witnessing an intimate moment that excluded me completely. The way they looked at each other spoke of shared history, of something deeper than step-siblings should share. After Victoria left, escorted to the door by Mary, I turned to Theodore, the jewelry box clutched in my hand. You lied to me, I said quietly. You told me the necklace was for Lucas. Theodore ran a hand through his dark hair, his expression guarded. I didn't want to upset you. By telling me you gave my anniversary gift to your stepsister? I challenged. Before I could react, Theodore closed the distance between us. His lips captured mine in a demanding kiss, effectively silencing my accusations. His hand cradled the back of my head, his body pressing mine against the wall. For a moment, I was lost in the familiar heat of him, my wolf responding to her mate despite my anger. I pushed against his chest, breaking the kiss. Don't do that, I said breathlessly. Don't try to distract me. Theodore's dark eyes studied me, his thumb tracing my lower lip. Fine. I lied about Lucas, he admitted. Victoria just ended her mating bond with that merchant wolf. She needed something to cheer her up. On our anniversary, I pointed out, stepping away from his touch. His expression softened, something rare for the usually stoic alpha. You know my obligations to Victoria. Catherine sacrificed everything for me. I nodded slowly. Everyone in the pack knew the story how Catherine had thrown herself between young Theodore and an assassin's silver dagger laced with wolfsbane. The double poisoning had put her in a coma that lasted to this day. I know what Catherine did, I said softly. But that doesn't explain why you lied to me about the necklace. Theodore's face darkened with old pain. Victoria was just a child when her mother fell into that coma. She's had a hard life, Layla. So giving her my anniversary gift was what compensation? I asked. It wasn't your gift yet, Theodore countered. And Victoria needed something positive after her divorce. The merchant wolf left her with nothing. I wanted to believe him, wanted to accept that his concern for Victoria was merely familial duty, repayment of an old debt. Yet something didn't feel right. The way he had rushed to her side, the gentle touch that he rarely showed even with me. I understand family obligations, I said finally, though my wolf whined in disagreement. But I don't appreciate being lied to. Theodore seemed relieved by my partial acceptance. He touched my cheek briefly. I have to go. Pack business. We'll talk more tonight. After he left, I carried the necklace upstairs, putting it away in my jewelry box rather than wearing it. Somehow, knowing Victoria had touched it, had possibly worn it, made me reluctant to place it around my neck. Grace paced restlessly inside me, sensing my unease. It's nothing, I whispered to her. Just hormones. The thought of our pups growing inside me brought a fresh wave of anxiety. I needed to tell Theodore soon, but after last night and this morning's revelations, I wasn't sure how. I showered and dressed for work, pushing my personal concerns aside as I prepared for my day at the Moonstone Therapy Center. As the senior therapist, I'd built the mental health program from nothing, focusing especially on helping Omega wolves who often suffered trauma in the rigid pack hierarchy. The therapy center had been my sanctuary, the one place where I'd earned respect through my own merit rather than as Theodore's mate. And now, with the announcement of a new clinical director position overseeing the center's expansion, I finally had a chance at real recognition. Sarah Mitchell was waiting for me at my office when I arrived, her wild hair pulled back in a messy bun, tattoos peeking out from under her professional blazer. As a lone wolf who'd chosen independence over pack life, Sarah understood better than most how important this promotion was to me. Big day, she grinned, perching on the edge of my desk. Nervous? I set my bag down, trying to ignore the morning sickness that threatened to overtake me. A little. But I've earned this, Sarah. Everyone knows I built this program. Hell yeah, you did, Sarah agreed, her fierce loyalty one of the reasons I loved her. The announcement should come through any minute now. As if on cue, both our phones pinged with an email notification. The official announcement from the Pack Council regarding the new clinical director position. I opened it, my heart pounding with anticipation. This was my moment, my chance to prove my worth beyond being Theodore's mate. My eyes scanned the message, and the blood drained from my face. What the hell? Sarah exclaimed, reading her own copy. This can't be right, but it was there in black and white. The Moonstone Pack Council was pleased to announce Victoria Moonstone as the new clinical director of the therapy center's expanding mental health practice. Not me. Victoria. Chapter 3. Unfair Games. Layla's POV. The words glared back at me from my phone screen, sharp and unforgiving. Victoria Moonstone, the new clinical director of the Moonstone Therapy Center. For a moment, I just stared, the announcement coursing through me like a jagged blade. Victoria. Of all people, Victoria. My new boss. Layla? Sarah's voice broke through my spiraling thoughts. She was perched on the edge of my desk, her dark eyes sharp with concern. What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. I swallowed hard, forcing my expression into something neutral. Anything to mask the wave of disbelief shaking me from the inside out. But Sarah had always been too perceptive for her own good. She leaned closer, her tattoos peeking out beneath the sleeve of her blouse as her arms crossed. Tell me what's going on, she said firmly. I know that look on your face. You're holding something back. My lips pressed together, the words fighting their way out. It's Victoria, I finally said, not quite able to keep the bitterness out of my voice. Her brows furrowed. Victoria, as in Theodore's stepsister? What does she have to do with... Her voice trailed off as her eyes flicked back to her own phone screen. Her expression darkened when realization hit. No way. I nodded stiffly. Wait, her? She's going to be the clinical director? Sarah threw up her hands, her voice rising slightly. This has to be a joke. She's not even qualified. Everyone knows she's a pack privilege hire. I finished for her, my voice flat. Her mouth opened, then closed again as frustration radiated off her. She shook her head, looking at me like I was insane. "And you're just okay with this?" I looked at her, forcing a brittle smile onto my face. "It doesn't matter. Everyone gets what they deserve in the end." That seemed to catch her off guard. She tilted her head, studying me as if trying to figure out what I really meant. "What's that supposed to mean?" Her curiosity tugged at me, but I stayed quiet. I didn't owe her or anyone else my plan. Not yet. It was still forming, still fragile. One wrong move, and everything might collapse before it even began. "I have an idea," I admitted after a pause, my voice low. "But it's not fully ready yet." Sarah frowned, leaning closer until her piercing gaze was locked onto mine. "Layla," I shrugged, picking at an invisible thread on my sleeve. "Let's just say I'll handle it." She stared at me a while longer before finally nodding, though her frustration lingered. Sarah had never been one to let things rest. But thankfully, she respected boundaries most of the time. "All right," she finally said, straightening. "But if you need backup, you better call me. Just say the word." I nodded, but my focus was already elsewhere. Back in my office, I tried to distract myself with the Wolfsbane research sprawled across my desk. It didn't work. No matter how many times I read the same line, the announcement kept replaying in my head, louder with each passing second. The knock on the door startled me. Rebecca Foster stepped in, balancing a steaming cup of coffee and a small teapot of my favorite herbal blend. Her warm eyes met mine briefly before glancing at the scattered papers on my desk. "You're amazing," I murmured tiredly as she set the drinks down. Her lips twitched into a small smile, though concern lingered in her eyes. "Luna, I said it before, and I'll say it again, you're far too calm about this." I arched an eyebrow, trying to summon some version of composed confidence. "Why waste energy?" I asked lightly. Rebecca didn't look convinced. Her mouth opened like she wanted to argue but thought better of it. Instead, she busied herself tidying the corner of my desk that wasn't already buried under research. Before she could say anything else, both our phones buzzed simultaneously. "Group announcement," Rebecca said, glancing at the screen. Her brows furrowed slightly. "Main hall meeting." My throat tightened as my chest filled with a turbulent mix of dread and anticipation. There was no question in my mind about what this meeting was for. The hall buzzed with murmurs as everyone gathered, pack members filling the space shoulder to shoulder. I stood near the back, arms crossed as I leaned against the wall, keeping my expression neutral, and there they were, standing at the front like they owned the room. Theodore, commanding and confident as ever, and Victoria, practically glowing with smug satisfaction as she scanned the crowd with faux humility. Theodore's voice cut through the murmurs. He didn't need to raise it. His natural alpha authority took care of that. "Thank you all for coming on short notice." He paused, his eyes sweeping the room before settling briefly on me. I didn't flinch under his gaze. "I'd like to introduce someone who'll be taking on an important leadership role for our health division," Theodore continued smoothly. "Victoria Moonstone, your new clinical director." I clenched my jaw as a smattering of polite applause echoed through the hall. Victoria smiled broadly, stepping forward to take her moment in the spotlight. Her voice was sugar-sweet as she began to speak, presenting herself as grateful and eager. But her words were laced with subtle reminders of her connection to Theodore and the Moonstone name. Not one mention of her lack of experience. Not one nod to the hard work others had put in, not even the faintest shred of acknowledgement for me. Rebecca leaned closer and muttered under her breath, "Failed mate bond and stolen position. Some people really have no shame." I allowed myself the faintest twitch of amusement at her bitterness. The meeting dragged on longer than it needed to as Victoria outlined her vision. But her words were empty, more for show than substance. By the time it was over, I was grinding my teeth, the strain growing harder to hide. Back in my office, I hoped for peace. But peace was a luxury I wouldn't be granted today. Through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, I saw them. Theodore and Victoria walking side by side down the hall, heading toward her new office. It would have been ordinary enough, if not for the way they moved together, the way Victoria rested her hand against Theodore's arm, and the way his hand lingered to brush her hair out of her face with a familiarity that set my wolf on edge. Grace stirred restlessly in my mind, her annoyance rolling in waves. "Luna?" Rebecca's voice pulled me from my spiral. I dropped my gaze quickly, hoping she hadn't seen the flicker of fire in my expression. The tea, I said shortly, picking up the cup. It's too bitter. Rebecca blinked in surprise before nodding hurriedly. I'll fix it. She scurried off, eager to keep busy. A knock on the door pulled me back to reality. Theodore stepped in, his presence dominating the room as it always did. He closed the door behind him and faced me with a weary expression, as though the meeting had taken more out of him than he cared to admit. Just checking in, he said, his voice softer than usual. How are you holding up? I tilted my head slightly, studying him. I'm fine, I replied evenly. He frowned as though he didn't quite believe me. I hope you know this wasn't a slight against you, Layla, he began. Don't explain. I cut him off sharply. I understand. His lips pressed together for a moment before he sighed. Victoria's nervous, he confessed. She's stepping into an unfamiliar role, and the pack is already watchful. I'm just helping her get adjusted. By letting her hang off your arm like you're mated? The words were out before I could stop them, sharp and cutting. Theodore blinked, startled. Layla, my voice rose. Do you even realize how this looks? Or does it not matter as long as she's comfortable? An exasperated noise escaped him as he ran a hand through his hair, his frustration evident. I'm trying to avoid creating conflict, Layla. Her position is precarious enough, and I'm expected to just accept that? I demanded. What about what I've done for the center? What about my qualifications? He sighed again, his posture weary. I know it's not fair, he said softly. No, I shot back. It's not fair. Something in my tone made him pause. A shadow crossed his expression as he stepped closer. Layla, he murmured, his voice low, stepping into my space. You have to know this doesn't diminish you, or your place in the pack. The entire Moonstone territory is yours. My laugh was humorless, bitter. Yours, Theodore, I corrected sharply. Not mine. His jaw tightened, the tension between us reaching a breaking point. If you're so generous, I said, retreating into sarcasm, why don't you transfer 1/10 of the territory to me, including the healing center and herb plantation? Chapter 4. Territory and Trust, Layla's POV. Theodore's dark eyes locked onto mine as I posed my question, half expecting him to dismiss it. Consider it done. His words were calm but unwavering. I blinked at him, unsure if I had heard him correctly. Just like that? He leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming lightly against the polished wood of his desk. His lips curved into a faint smile, but his tone carried no jest. Just like that. It's not a challenge, Layla. The territory isn't going to someone outside the pack. You're my mate. My Luna. I stared at him, caught completely off guard by his readiness. Grace stirred in my mind, her ears perking up with interest. Territory meant respect. It meant something far deeper, power and loyalty tied to our pack's very foundation. It was no trivial thing to him or anyone in the pack. You're in a good mood today, I replied carefully, studying him. His expression didn't shift, but the intensity in his eyes softened slightly. It's not about my mood, Layla. It's about you finally accepting this. You deserve it. You've always deserved it. The warmth in his voice filled a space I didn't even realize had grown so cold in the past few days. But Grace, though soothed, wasn't entirely satisfied. Would you make the same offer to Victoria? I asked, the words out of my mouth before I could stop them. At the mention of her name, his entire demeanor changed. His jaw clenched, the faint smile fading from his lips. His eyebrows knitted slightly, a flash of something defensive crossing his face. No, he said firmly, the timbre in his voice leaving no room for doubt. And why not? I pushed gently, keeping my tone even but curious. Inside, Grace paced cautiously, waiting for his answer. His dark eyes bore into mine. Victoria gets the clinical director position, that's all. He stepped closer, the weight of his presence filling the room as his voice softened but retained its stern edge. You are my mate, Layla. My Luna. You hold a place in this pack that no one, certainly not Victoria, could ever replace. Before I could respond, he moved swiftly, pulling me into his arms. The solid warmth of his chest pressed against my back as his hands rested on my hips. His deep voice brushed against my ear, both soothing and commanding. The territory will make you a true power holder, Layla. This is where you belong, under the Moonstone name, with me. His thumb grazed over my knuckles as he gently held onto my hand. Every single pack member will answer to you when this is done. Even me, he added, his voice dipping into a playful tone as he pressed a kiss to my shoulder. His lips lingered for a moment as he finished in a teasing murmur, both in pack matters and private ones. Heat crept up my neck, and Grace's playful purr hummed in agreement. He chuckled softly against my skin, clearly enjoying the effect his words had on me. Despite myself, I couldn't suppress the faint blush rising to my cheeks. "Theodore," I began, my voice quiet but holding its firm edge as I turned slightly to face him. "This isn't something you should joke about." His eyes held mine, serious now, though the faint curve of amusement still lingered on his lips. "I'm not joking, Layla. You're my equal in this pack. I own nothing you don't already own with me." For the first time in days, I felt the weight pressing against my chest begin to lift. The doubts that had gnawed at the corners of my mind found themselves quieted, at least for now. "You're impossible," I muttered under my breath, but a soft smile tugged at my lips. "No, I'm yours," he replied easily, his hand cupping my cheek for the briefest of moments before he stepped back. He glanced at the clock on the wall and sighed. "I need to leave for the council meeting. They'll raise a fuss if I'm late again." "Of course," I said, smoothing my dress as I tried to refocus. Before he turned to leave, he paused at the door. His dark gaze sought mine once more, his tone lighter as he said, "Don't forget the full moon gathering tonight at the Pack Mansion." My hand instinctively brushed over my stomach as his words settled. This was my chance. Tonight would be the perfect time to share the news. I smiled at him, a touch of mystery in my expression. "I have a surprise for you." His brow arched in intrigue as a smirk teased at the corner of his mouth. "A surprise? You'll have to wait," I said coyly, stepping past him toward my desk. "Patience isn't exactly my strong suit, Luna," he quipped, but I waved him off with a playful flick of my hand as he finally left the room. The rest of the morning passed quickly, though my mood had shifted more positively since our conversation. I was still organizing papers at the therapy office when a familiar knock interrupted me. Victoria Moonstone stood in the doorway, her piercing blue gaze guarded while her composed demeanor masked whatever brought her here. "Luna Layla," she greeted with her usual polished tone. "May I come in?" I gestured to the chair opposite my desk, though Grace growled faintly in the back of my mind. She sat gracefully, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "I wanted to apologize," she began, her voice soft but almost too practiced. "I never meant for this to cause tension between us." Her eyes briefly flicked to mine before looking down, as if feigning humility. I kept my expression neutral, leaning back in my chair. "The position is yours now. Make the most of it." Her brows arched slightly, though her polite smile didn't waver. "You're being incredibly gracious about this, Layla," she said sweetly. Then her tone shifted faintly, carrying an edge that I couldn't ignore. "Theodore made it clear you can take any role you want within the pack. He said you have free reign." It wasn't just the words that bothered me, it was the way she said them. Like she was testing boundaries, asserting herself in a way that made Grace bristle. "You should remain focused on the healing center," I said flatly, choosing my words carefully. My concern wasn't about titles or power, but the stability of the pack. Victoria roaming unchecked was the last thing any of us needed. Her expression shifted again, a flicker of surprise that she quickly hid. "You don't have to worry about me," she replied, her voice dripping with artificial sincerity. Before I could respond, a sharp knock broke the tension. Daniel Hayes entered, a stack of documents in hand. He placed them delicately on my desk and gave a respectful bow. "The territory transfer papers, Luna Layla," he announced formally. Victoria's controlled facade cracked noticeably at his words. Her gaze shot to the documents, then back to me. "Territory transfer?" she repeated, her tone slipping into disbelief. I didn't look at her as I began signing the papers. My voice was calm but cold. "I don't believe that's any concern of yours." She flinched slightly, but pressed on, her tone quickly shifting into one of apparent regret. "You misunderstand me, Layla. I have no interest in material possessions. I care only about maintaining peace between us." I fixed her with a flat stare, Grace's dislike bleeding into my tone. "Then start by respecting what isn't yours, Victoria." Her lips twitched as if words were caught at the tip of her tongue, but she nodded stiffly instead. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, I found myself eager for the evening ahead. I left the center with a mix of excitement and anticipation bubbling in my chest. Theodore was waiting near his car, standing tall with his arms crossed against his chest. He usually greeted me with warmth, but something about his demeanor felt different tonight. "Theodore," I started, a soft smile on my lips as I approached him. Just as I opened my mouth to speak, I heard the subtle hum of the passenger window rolling down. My eyes darted to the gleaming glass as it lowered slowly. Victoria's face appeared, framed perfectly in the SUV's window. Her golden hair cascaded over her shoulders as she offered me a practiced smile. "I hope you don't mind," she said, her tone light but overly sweet. My car broke down, so my brother kindly offered to drive me to the full moon party. She paused briefly, her emphasis on the word brother deliberate. "I trust that's okay with you?" she added, tilting her head as if to appear innocent. The words hit me like a slap, my chest tightening as Grace snarled faintly in the back of my mind. My gaze snapped to Theodore. I searched his face for some kind of explanation, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. Chapter 5. Revelations and Betrayals. Layla's POV. Victoria settled herself comfortably in the passenger seat. My chest tightened with frustration. Her presence there felt like an intrusion, an intentional act to unsettle me. "Victoria, please sit in the back," I said, keeping my voice steady though it grated on my nerves to remain calm. Grace growled softly in my mind, annoyed by the audacity in Victoria's actions. She turned her big, blue, innocent eyes on me, her lips forming a small pout. "Oh, but I always sit in the front with Theodore. The view is so much better from here." Her voice dipped, almost as if she were reminiscing deliberately. "We used to go on drives like this all the time before. Well, before everything changed." I narrowed my eyes at her through the driver's side mirror. Everything in her posture screamed fragility, but the way she glanced at Theodore said otherwise. She wasn't innocent. She was self-serving. She sighed dramatically, one hand going to her temple as if this whole ordeal was too much for her delicate self. "Please, Layla, try to understand. As a woman who's lost her partner, you should sympathize." Theodore shifted beside her, his expression unreadable. "Just let it go, Layla. She's been through a lot recently." Something inside me snapped. I marched past Theodore and snatched the keys from his hand. "Fine," I said sharply. "If she's so attached to that seat, let her stay." I opened the driver's side door, sliding into the seat before anyone could stop me. "As Theodore's Luna," I added, biting off the words grimly, "it's only fair that I show kindness to his dear sister." I stressed the word sister just enough to make her uncomfortable. Theodore frowned slightly, his brows knitting. "Layla," I silenced him with a look. He closed his mouth, but not before letting out a heavy sigh. Victoria, to her credit, looked a little surprised, though she quickly schooled her features into one of satisfaction as she folded her hands neatly in her lap. The drive to the mansion was quiet. Too quiet. The tension in the car felt suffocating, the silence sharp enough to cut through steel. Theodore, trying to break the tension, reached for the mini-fridge, tucked neatly under the vehicle's console. "Here," he said, handing me a glass of strawberry juice. It was my favorite, and I had always appreciated these small gestures from him in the past. I took a small sip, the taste sweeter than I remembered. It clung too heavily to my tongue, making me wince slightly. "No thanks," I said, handing the glass back to him. Theodore didn't seem to mind. He brought the glass to his lips and finished it himself without a second thought. It was a small, familiar routine we often shared, something I never thought about twice. But Victoria, of course, had something to say about it. "That's not very hygienic, is it?" she remarked, her voice carrying a pointed edge. "Sharing drinks like that?" I shot her a glance through the rearview mirror, my emerald green eyes locking onto hers. "Theodore and I are bedmates, Victoria." The words came out sharper than I intended. "Sharing drinks is hardly an issue when you compare it to kissing, don't you think?" Her lips twitched, almost like she wanted to smirk but held back. "Well, speaking of sharing, do you remember the night of your marking ceremony, Layla?" The air in the car shifted. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. Theodore turned his head to glare at her. "Victoria." She ignored him entirely, her voice taking on a falsely innocent tone. "Didn't Theodore tell you? That night, I was in trouble. He rushed over to help me. Stayed with me all night, in fact." The words hit me like a physical blow. My wolf, Grace, howled painfully in the back of my mind. My thoughts froze, the implications of what she'd said crashing over me like a tidal wave. The car lunged forward abruptly as my foot slammed on the brake. My pulse thundered in my ears, louder than the horns blaring angrily from the cars behind us. "What did you just say?" I asked, my voice low, trembling with barely restrained anger. Theodore shifted in his seat, his expression hard as he turned to Victoria. "Victoria, enough." His tone was sharp, filled with warning. Victoria tilted her head slightly, feigning surprise. "What? I'm just being honest. Mated couples shouldn't have secrets from each other, right? I thought Layla would know." I struggled to focus on the road ahead, my thoughts spiraling. That night, our marking ceremony had haunted me for years. Theodore had left shortly after the ceremony, claiming pack business had required his attention. "Theodore." My voice cracked slightly as I forced the words out. "Is it true? Did you go to her that night?" His silence was the final confirmation I needed. "Theodore!" I nearly shouted this time, demanding an answer that I already dreaded to hear. "It wasn't like that, Layla," he said at last. His voice was calm, too calm. "There were circumstances, things you wouldn't understand. Try me." My hands had begun to shake, though I gripped the wheel tightly to steady myself. Victoria's voice cut through like a blade. "If anything, you should be thanking me, Layla. I didn't mean to cause a rift between you two, but surely a Luna understands duty." Theodore was just being a good alpha. Theodore's growl filled the car. "Victoria, stop talking." "Why?" she asked innocently, batting her lashes. "If we're discussing the truth, shouldn't everything be out in the open?" Theodore slammed a fist on the dashboard, making the entire car shudder slightly. "Enough! Do not test me any further tonight, Victoria." The timing of my phone ringing felt almost like some cruel joke. Elder William's name flashed on the screen, pulling me back into the present. I answered, my voice clipped but steady. "Yes, Elder William. We're almost at the Pack Mansion." The rest of the drive passed in brittle silence. When we finally arrived, Elder William was already waiting at the entrance, his ancient gaze narrowing as Victoria stepped out of the passenger seat with Theodore trailing behind her. His expression betrayed his displeasure, though he said nothing outright in the presence of the other pack members gathering nearby. Inside, the tension only grew thicker. Richard Moonstone approached quickly, his silver hair gleaming under the bright chandeliers of the hall. "Theodore, Layla," he greeted, his tone warm, though his next words had an edge that made Grace snarl faintly in my mind. "You must take extra care of Victoria during this time. She's been through so much since her divorce." I couldn't stop the bitter laugh that bubbled out before I could contain it. "Oh, but Victoria is my superior now," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "As clinical director, shouldn't she be the one looking after me?" The hall fell into a stunned silence. Heads turned, whispers beginning to buzz softly among the other pack members. Elder William's voice cut through the murmurs like a blade. "Layla is correct," he stated firmly, his tone carrying the weight of authority. "The clinical director position should have belonged to her. It was her rightful role." The elder's eyes darkened as they locked on Theodore. "Your sense of obligation toward Victoria is clouded, Theodore. Such misplaced loyalty could jeopardize the balance of this pack." "Elder William," Victoria started, her voice trembling with faux vulnerability. "If this is causing so much discord, I'm willing to step down." The elder interrupted her with a curt wave of his hand. "You cannot fool me, Victoria. Save your performative gestures. This pack deserves genuine leaders, not facade." Her face turned a shade of red I'd never seen before. Her lips trembled as she turned and fled from the room without another word. "I trust you'll handle this, Theodore," Richard said, placing a heavy hand on his son's shoulder. "As alpha, it's your duty to ensure she receives proper care." Theodore hesitated briefly before sighing. He turned toward the doors where Victoria had just disappeared, though his jaw clenched tightly. I could see the storm in his eyes, but not once had he looked at me. Against my better judgment, I followed after him. I caught fragments of their heated conversation as I neared. "What were you thinking?" Theodore's voice was a harsh growl, his alpha energy spilling out. "Why did you bring up that night?" I couldn't help it," Victoria stammered, her voice breaking. "I wasn't lying, Theodore. Seeing you with her, it's unbearable." "You're jealous? Of Layla?" His voice was filled with incredulity and barely restrained anger. "Yes, I'm jealous," she snapped, her voice shaky but loud. "I divorced him for you, Theodore." I've always loved you. My breath caught, my world tilting under the weight of her confession. Everything clicked into place, her actions, her constant presence, the countless stolen moments between them. And now, nothing would ever be the same. Chapter 6. Shattered Illusions. Layla's POV. You have to end things with her, Theodore. Victoria's voice rang out in the quiet night, sharp and desperate. We both know your heart isn't really hers. I froze behind the thick oak tree, my breath caught in my throat. The crisp night air seemed to chill my very core. Grace stirred inside me, growling low, urging me to stay hidden and listen. The voices carried through the open space just outside the Pack mansion. I stayed rooted where I was, my heart hammering painfully against my ribs. Peeking around the trunk of the tree, I could see them. Theodore stood there, tall and commanding as always, his hands shoved in his pockets. And Victoria, she was gripping his arm with an intensity that made my skin crawl, her nails digging into the tailored fabric of his suit jacket. Her perfectly styled curls framed her pale, distressed face. But it wasn't her usual polished appearance that drew my focus. It was the raw emotion contorting her features. Her wide, tear-filled eyes and trembling lips weren't fooling anyone, especially not me. I couldn't look away. My chest felt tight as the scene unfolded before me. "Stop this, Victoria," Theodore said, his voice low and frustrated. "You're making a scene." "Making a scene?" Her laughter was bitter, wild even. "That's what you're worried about? Not the fact that you're pretending to care about that woman." "She's my mate," Theodore snapped, his voice sharp, but not sharp enough for my liking. "She's your Luna by title, nothing more." Victoria shot back fiercely, her tears spilling now. "You kept me close all those years for a reason, Theodore. You chose to be at my side first. You've always cared for me." My stomach twisted painfully as I clenched my fist against the rough bark of the tree. Theodore's hesitation hit harder than Victoria's words ever could. "That was a long time ago, Victoria," Theodore said finally, dragging a hand through his hair. I knew that gesture too well, one of his rare tells. A clear sign he was troubled. "The past. It doesn't matter anymore." "It doesn't matter?" Her voice broke at the end, her anguish cutting through the stillness of the night. She moved even closer, her expression utterly raw now. "Everything I've done, Theodore, it's all been for you. I left him because of you. I gave up my life for you." I felt like I couldn't breathe. Each word she spoke felt like a claw sinking deeper into my chest. "Victoria," Theodore said, his tone softening slightly, and my heart dropped even further. "You're not thinking clearly. This conversation isn't going anywhere. Don't dismiss me," she yelled, her fingers tightening even more on his arm. "I can't stand watching you lie to yourself anymore. Just tell me the truth. Theodore, do you even love Layla the way you loved me?" I felt the ground shift under my feet. Time seemed to freeze as both Grace and I held our breaths. Now was the moment. Now he would shut her down for good. He would deny her with all the certainty and conviction of an alpha king. He would tell her his heart was mine, that there was no room left in him for anyone else. Surely, he would, but he didn't. Theodore's gaze dropped to the ground. His jaw tightened. His silence burned hotter than any words could have. "That's what I thought," Victoria breathed, her voice dripping with triumph laced with heartbreak. "Your words are reckless and stupid," Theodore said abruptly, his voice hardening. But even as he spoke the rebuke, there was something almost hesitant in his tone. He wasn't denying her accusations fully, nor was he shutting her out completely. I felt my knees weaken, my balance faltering for a moment, though I gripped the tree for support. Grace whined in my mind, both furious and heartbroken at the same time. "Layla?" A voice came from behind me, startling me out of my daze. I turned quickly, finding Marcus, one of the beta-ranked security guards, standing there with confusion in his eyes. "It's chilly out," he said cautiously, holding out his coat. "Do you need this, Luna?" I gently took the coat, trying my best to gather my composure. My hands were trembling, and I hoped he wouldn't notice. But his voice had already carried across the lawn, loud enough to grab Theodore and Victoria's attention. Both their heads snapped in my direction. Theodore's face shifted immediately, his stern expression melting into something softer, more concerned. Victoria, however, froze in place, her blue eyes wide with shock and perhaps just a hint of fear. With long strides, Theodore closed the distance between us. He didn't speak immediately, just reached out to take the coat from Marcus and carefully draped it over my shoulders. His hands lingered, warm and grounding, yet they provided no comfort. "What are you doing out here, Layla?" he asked softly, his tone calm and gentle. To anyone else, he might have sounded like a concerned husband, but I could feel the tension radiating from him. "I just needed some air," I lied, lifting my chin to meet his gaze. If he suspected anything, he didn't show it. Instead, he glanced briefly over his shoulder at Victoria, who was now fumbling with her phone, dialing quickly. "Let's go inside," Theodore said as he attempted to guide me back toward the mansion. I didn't resist. But as we walked, I couldn't help noticing how often his phone buzzed in his pocket. I could practically feel the turmoil rolling off him. Every time another call came through, he tensed, his eyes darting briefly toward the screen, though he never answered. Behind us, Victoria lingered, her phone pressed to her ear as she watched us disappear into the crowd. Inside the Pack mansion, I felt like I was moving through water. The warmth of the room and the pleasant hum of voices did nothing to ease the tight knot in my chest. Theodore remained by my side, a protective hand resting lightly on my back. To anyone observing, we likely appeared like the perfect Alpha and Luna. But the storm brewing within me threatened to crack the facade at any moment. "Elder William." Theodore stepped forward respectfully as the elder approached us near the exit hall. Elder William didn't return Theodore's polite nod immediately. Instead, his piercing gaze shifted to me. His sharp, aged eyes seemed to see far more than I was willing to show. "Treat her well, Theodore," the elder said finally, his voice low but stern. "It would be unwise to forget the allies she has." Theodore's brow furrowed. "Elder, the Snowfang Pack has shown particular interest in her welfare recently," Elder William continued, his tone leaving no room for argument. He glanced briefly at me before turning back to Theodore. "Do not let your attention wander where it does not belong." Theodore nodded stiffly. "I understand my duties, Elder," he replied, his tone respectful but clipped. The elder gave a short nod before walking away, leaving Theodore and me standing in tense silence. Finally, we stepped outside, the cool night air a stark contrast to the warmth of the mansion. As we walked back toward our den, the silence stretched between us uncomfortably. "Theodore," I said, stopping in my tracks. "What exactly was your relationship with Victoria during your training years?" Theodore came to a halt a few steps ahead of me. He turned slowly, his expression guarded. The usual confident edge in his posture seemed slightly subdued. "We were close," he admitted finally after a long pause. His words were careful, deliberate, almost became a couple. The confession wasn't shocking. I'd already pieced that much together. What stung the most was his tone, calm, like this was just an insignificant detail from his past. "I was training at the neighboring pack then," I said, my voice quiet but steady. "You seem to have forgotten that." Something flickered across his face, surprise, perhaps even guilt. "That was you?" I crossed my arms tightly over my chest, swallowing the bitterness rising in my throat. Theodore stepped closer, his expression softening slightly. I'm sorry," he said, his voice low. "It was so many years ago. My memory." He sighed, frustration clouding his features. "It wasn't deliberate, Layla." Before I could respond, his phone buzzed again, cutting through the night like a sharp blade. Victoria's name flashed across the screen. Again, Theodore's jaw tightened, his hand hovering over the phone as if debating whether to answer. Finally, he silenced the call with an irritated swipe of his thumb. "She's relentless," he muttered, more to himself than to me. "Richard and Catherine let her get away with so much growing up. She never learned boundaries." Something inside me snapped at his excuse. Without a word, I reached out and snatched the phone from his hand. His eyes widened slightly in surprise, but he didn't stop me. I scrolled through his contacts until I found Victoria's name. With a few swift taps, I blocked the number and handed the phone back to him. "There," I said firmly. "Problem solved."
Free trial chapters of this book are over. Do you like it? If you enjoy this book, please support the author's work by clicking the link below and buy it on Amazon Kindle. Have a nice day. See you in the next video.